Hello, I wanted to do a video explaining how the British Empire was not as great as they make it out to be, because they say this argument that this is about. They say the ex-colonies of the British are richer than the ex-colonies of Spain, and therefore the British Empire was better. That's a stupid, superficial argument, because it doesn't take chronology into account. It doesn't take context into account besides that. Alright, so chronology. When did the British Empire begin? Wasn't it like the 1600s? Maybe the first explorers were in the late 1500s, something like that. Then it was 100 years after the Spanish began their empire. Actually, the Spanish began their empire not in 1492, before that, because the Spanish, especially Aragon, was in the Mediterranean, conquering an empire by that time already. I think it was by that time. So the Spanish began first, and therefore, well, that's redundant. Therefore, it stands to reason that it is natural for them to finish first. The sooner you start a race, the sooner you finish. Most empires last, what, 200 years or 300 years? Some last very long, like the Romans. Some are very brief, like the Mongol. And then they have successor states, which last long, but the actual empire, the single Mongolian empire, was brief. I think it was 200 years or so, like the United States, basically. So chronology. The sooner you begin, the sooner you finish, right? And if you finish sooner, that means you have more time for your trophy to collect dust, for your armor to get rust. In other words, for your accomplishments to be a thing of the past, and for your wealth to disappear. Capiche? But Brit boos don't get this, or they don't want to get this. They're stupid. You're idiots. You're idiots. And I'm saying this very impersonally. I don't even know who's behind the screen, on the other side of the screen, as it were. So don't take that personally, but you will anyway. Regardless, if it applies to you, that's where you are. You're an idiot. Because only an idiot would say, hey, this guy is an old man, so he's pathetic and weak. We're so much better. Well, the reason that he's an old man is because he was born first. He's been around before you were even born. You were shitting your diapers when he went around the world on a ship. He was running marathons when you couldn't even walk. The Spanish went around the world when the English were nothing. Drake was a mosquito, as I covered in my series on the Overrated British Empire, where I proved it wasn't the biggest. As I always say, the British say that oceans don't count, even though they sing about ruling waves, and even though they harvested whales, very profitable oceans. The most profitable trade routes are maritime, not by land, and the empires of Western Europe were by the sea. So how can you not count the sea? That's idiotic. You guys are idiots and hypocrites. So back to the original subject, chronology. And so that's why the Spanish lost most of their retirement savings, because they had already retired first. That's why. That's why. It doesn't take a genius to figure that out. But again, you guys are idiots. So the next point is Alexander the Great. The Macedonian Empire has been declining far longer than the Spanish, far longer than the British. So if you're a Brit, are you going to boast over Alexander the Great and say, ha ha, Greece is poor today, ha 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 ha, Greece is so poor, ha ha ha, look how indebted they are to the Germans, ha 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 ha, the Greeks, ha ha ha. Alexander the Great was greater than any Brit who has ever lived and who will ever live, as far as military glory. And the same goes to the Spanish. He outshines or outshone any Spaniard. So the most glorious European conqueror was Greek. I think he was part Illyrian, but I have to look more into that. And that would explain his part blonde hair. Anyway, so don't boast in them, because their empire began first and it died first. So they've had more time to lose their savings, as it were. It doesn't take a genius, but again, you guys are idiots, Brits and Brit boos. A lot of Brit boos are actually Indians. I've seen I've seen uh, I've seen an Indian who got angry because I pointed out how inferior the British Empire was. Why? Because the Indians were like, we're part of the empire. If the empire was pathetic, that means we're pathetic. So you Indians are mentally colonized by the British, not just because you're macro-evolutionists who followed Darwin, who wanted all Indians exterminated. But and I plan to video on that. But also because you defend the British Empire. A lot of you guys are ridiculous if you do that, because that's like people in a concentration camp rooting for Hitler. Uh, Another point on that argument and its stupidity is the United States and Australia, New Zealand, they're rich, yes, but India is full of poor people. It has more poor people than perhaps any other country in the world, because India is a country made up of countries. It's a bunch of kingdoms stuck together, and which lost their monarchies because you can't have them with democracy coinciding. That's a lie. There are no kings anymore. There's only stupid democracy, a bandwagon fallacy that only libtard countries cling to, because it's a bandwagon fallacy. That's the best thing you can come up with, a flaw in logic as your political system. It's a flaw in logic. Athenian democracy murdered Socrates for telling youth to question the establishment. That's how stupid democracy is. There's not a single example of a good one. US, I left it because it's shit. US is a joke. US preaches democracy, and this brings me to my other points. How did the United States, this ex-British colony, get rich? By stealing, by mass murder, from sea to shining sea, genociding the Native Americans. Why are there such few brown people there? Of the natives, there are a lot of imported African blacks, brown people. They're black, but they're actually brown. You know what I mean? We're talking about the Native Americans. They genocided them. They stole their resources. That's how the U.S. got rich. And also, of course, Napoleon gave them Louisiana. The Russians gave them Alaska. The Spanish gave them Florida and more. It was all by Masonic design. The U.S. was supposed to rise. Oh, and I'm going to digress again. Why? Look at a map of the Spanish in America. They had from like Alaska all the way to the tip of South America. And they left a huge area in North America in the east for the British and the French to arrive, because that was exactly what the Spanish leaders intended, for the Spanish Empire to have rivals, to chip away at the Spanish holdings, or take over bulks at a time, like against Mexico when the U.S. took a bunch from Mexico. That was by design. The Spanish knew what would happen if they left that land vacant, or not vacant, but left only with weak tribes that the British and the French could easily conquer. If the Spanish took over those places, it would be Spanish today, but the Spanish left it for the British. So no, Brits, you were allowed to be in America. The Spanish let you be in America. It was all by design. You guys are pathetic. You guys didn't accomplish that. Anyway, so digression over. Back to the other topic. So chronology, and then the rich countries that were in the British Empire. Well, India is poor. Bangladesh is poor. And Indians will blame the British, not all Indians, but a lot of them blame the British for everything, but they do have a point that the British stole a lot and gave back little. The British were so pathetic that they didn't even want to extirpate Hinduism, which justifies the oppressive caste system that ruins the lives of millions, probably, of Dalits, the so-called untouchable caste, today, as my series Exposing Hinduism elaborates. The British didn't even care about helping the society. They had railroads not for the Indians, but for the British interest, to get the British crown more money so that they can rape more people around the world and steal their resources. The Nazis were mere followers of Darwin. The Nazis were not as bad as British. The British made the Nazis look like amateurs in genocide. Compare Tasmanians today, 0, because the British are pros at genocide, to Ashkenazim today, millions, because the Nazis were amateurs at genocide. So, and look at Tasmania. The British wiped them all out. So why are Tasmanians of today rich? Because they stole from the original Tasmanians. Why are Native Americans not Native Americans, Latin Americans, poor generally? because they are exploited by the gringos, the U.S. people, and um, and they were divided against each other like the British wanted. If they stayed with Spain, they wouldn't be so poor. The poor are always the majority everywhere, says Jesus. You will always have the poor among you, says Jesus. However, there would be far less poverty in Latin America if they were still with Spain. So you got what you, be careful what you wish for. You want to be free from Spain, that means you will be weaker and exploited by the British vultures. That's what you get. And yet you celebrate Bolivar, that idiot who made all Latin Americans weak. I shit on his name. I hate Bolivar and I hate Napoleon. Napoleon. Gotta do a video on him. Let's see. So, so that's why the ex-colonies of the British are rich generally. It's because they're more recently rich, having been in the British Empire not too long ago, as opposed to Spanish, and the change is even more drastic compared to the Macedonian Empire of centuries ago. Even what 2,300 years ago? I forgot exactly how much. I'm not good at math, but you know what I mean. That's how long it's been for the Greeks to lose their glory. That's why they're poor today. So don't boast over them. You have to take context into account, but you Brit boos fail to do that because you're stupid. Or dishonest, which still makes you stupid because dishonesty is stupid. Because you look like cowards. Because you are cowards. And you're exposed for it. So once again, the British narrative crumbles when you look at the big picture.